Janet, ever since I have been associated with Myrtle Grove United Methodist, I have known that the Bostons were a big part of the church. Would you like to tell us about your life at Myrtle Grove United Methodist, what the church has meant to you, and how it's impacted your spiritual life, and what ministries you've been involved in?
Okay, well, we were a military family. My dad retired Air Force to Pensacola and was looking for a church home. We went to a little teeny tiny Methodist church on the other side of West Pensacola, and they didn't have anything for the children and the youth at all. So my parents didn't want to stay there, and the next church we went to was Myrtle Grove Methodist, and everybody loved it, and that was it. And we've been here since I was in the third grade. Teresa Lee was my best friend. We've known each other since the third grade. And one of the things that I remember most about being a child here was my parents and to show a difference in the kind of attitude you get with parents nowadays. During a class on a Wednesday night once, I had a problem with one of the teachers, and I just thought that she was horrible, and I stormed out of the room, and I was going to tell my mom. And I dragged my mom out of her class and told her how horrible this teacher was, and she took me by the arm and walked me all the way back down the hall and said, "Apologize and get in that room, and I don't want to see you again." I was like, So, yeah, my parents, my mom was a Baptist. My dad's family is Methodist all the way back to the Ark, I think. So we went to the Methodist church, and we were raised with you don't badmouth. You don't badmouth the church, no matter what's going on, and you never badmouth the pastor. If you said anything around the dinner table or anything else, that was it. My dad was like, what's in the Bible, you don't badmouth the pastor. And that was just how we were raised. And the church was a really important part of everything we did. We were here Wednesday nights, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights. And it wasn't enough to just grow up in the church. You had to participate. My parents, as soon as you were old enough, they wanted to know what you planned on doing in the church. And I was the youngest Sunday school teacher that we ever had at Myrtle Grove Methodist. I started when I was 16. And I taught Sunday school, and actually my partner, when I got a little bit older, was Teresa Lee. We partnered for a while. And later, years later, my mom was my associate teacher. But when I was in college, I was the youth director, and the education director later. They used to have positions like they don't have them anymore. Education director. I don't know why, but they don't have this kind of positions anymore. And when Donnie came along, I got involved with the Scouts, and have been pretty much involved with him since then. And he's 35, so that's been a long time. And I was the children's director here. Well, first I was a nursery director. I was paid staff then. I was as a nursery director, the position that Amy's in now. I did that for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years when my guys were little, Scooter and Joey and all, they were little. And then I resigned from that and took the position as a children's director, and I think I did that for like 25 years or something like that. I've been working with the children in this church in one form or another since I was 16, and that's been over 40 years, so long time. My mother sang in the choir, and that was a really big part of her life. And she developed Alzheimer's, and when she got a little older, and I had promised her we wouldn't put her in a home, so we brought her back and forth religiously, and the last thing she had to give up was choir because she reached a point to where she couldn't read music anymore. But the Bible tells us that whatever's in your heart, comes out of your mouth. So I know her heart was still towards God right up to the end, because my mother sang all the time, even when she couldn't talk. She would sing, and it was the old hymns. It was the church music that she grew up on, because she started singing in the choir when she was like 15 years old. So she would sing all the time, and sometimes in the middle of the night, everybody would be sound asleep, and you could hear her start singing again. And even when she couldn't talk at all near the end, when she was sleeping, she would hum, and it would be the tunes to the old music that she grew up on. So it was really nice to hear that, to know how she felt, what her heart was like. So yeah, this church has seen my kids get married, all baptized here, my parents' funerals here, and Susan and actually and Alicia, all of their funerals here. So pretty much every good and bad thing that's marked our lives as a family has been right here at Myrtle Grove Methodist. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Are there any stories that come to mind that you'd like to share? I know you must have a million, but
Yeah, a million. I don't know. There's just been so many stories, good and bad, over the years. I will say that I've always told my teachers when I would train them that they need to be aware of the fact that they never know where a child's going to be or where they're headed when they meet them, and show them the kind of love that they should get from a Christian, so that they don't turn their back on the church. And that sort of hit home to me several years back when I had a young man, when I was just out of college and as a youth director. I had a young man who lived right here in this neighborhood, and that kid stayed in trouble all the time. I mean, he just could not stay out of trouble. And I actually had people come to me and say, "You need to get this kid out of this church." And and a lot of them were parents of girls, you know. And I wouldn't do it. I just held on to him, and I kept telling him that he was going to be something special if he could just channel that in a productive way. And he joined the Air Force and left Pensacola, and I didn't hear from him for years. And then I got a message from one of his friends telling me that he had become a chaplain in the Air Force. And now he's retired from the Air Force, but he's a preacher. And he has a beautiful family, and his kids all go to church and are going into the ministry. And I thought to myself, what if I had kicked that kid to the curb like everybody wanted? You know, how many people would not have come to Christ as a result of him not being what he should have been, you know? And there's just tons of stories like that.
I know that there are a lot of things that you and Barbara do that are a result of your philosophy of what it means to serve Jesus Christ. Would you like to share that with us?
Well, we started years ago with I had a minivan, and my mom had a minivan, and we used to, on Sunday mornings, go pick our little ones up, and they would always drag a few friends along, so we would have two minivans full of little kids that we brought to church with us. And we did that on our own for years. And after a while, it just kept growing and growing. And we actually even bought a van that seated 15 people and had wheelchair access, so that we could bring these kids to church with us. And that sort of morphed into what we have now, is the bus, the transportation thing that we do now, which is primarily, Barbara, because not very many people, one, are willing, but two, can do what they need to do with all the tests and the insurance and all that to be able to drive the van. But it's really important. I know it causes frustration for some people sometimes, because, these kids don't know how to behave right. They don't do this, they don't do that, and people just don't understand that church isn't a country club, and it's not a museum, and it's not supposed to be a mausoleum, you know. It's nothing that you're supposed to be too comfortable with. It's all about reaching folks, and that's what it's supposed to be about. And these kids may grow up to be that preacher one day. You know, they may grow up to be nothing. They may end up in jail. But I don't know how many times I've even had someone say to me, I went to jail, and then I remembered that one Sunday school class or that one vacation Bible school I went to. And I got down on my knees because I remembered that. So, you know, you may never cause anyone to be saved because of it, but you don't ever know. I remember Miss Sharon, Derek's grandmother. He used to be the youth director here. She came up to me one time and she said she wanted me to know how important the bus ministry was. And I, you know, was busy and said, oh, that's nice, you know, because people say stuff like that as much as I get the negative, you know. And she said, no, she wanted to make sure that I understood that she came from the wrong kind of family in a very small town and was ostracized because of it. And the only reason her life changed was because someone used a transportation type of ministry to get her to church. And in church, she found acceptance and love. And as a result, almost all her children and grandchildren are in ministry right now.
Praise God.
You know, and that's a lot of people because somebody cared enough to get this kid that nobody wanted to have anything to do with to church, you know. So next time you get upset with them because they're running through the fellowship hall or they don't say please or thank you or they take too many cookies or, you know, whatever the case is, just remember that that kid may be somebody one day that is a direct result of what you said or did
And that can
to
work
change their life.
both ways.
And it can work both ways.
I'm glad we got that on tape, because I know that's your belief. So to end, what would you say after this walk with the Lord over these years in this church? What has been the most gratifying thing to you?
Well, I hope it hasn't come yet. I'm looking forward to that. There's been a lot of gratifying things, but I'm looking forward to the one that's going to be the most gratifying. It's still out there.
That's great. Thank you so much, Janet.
You're
Is
welcome.
there anything else you want to tell us?
Just remember, it's not a mausoleum. It's not a museum. It's not a country club. It's a hospital.